Well, it appears Senator Mike Braun has come face to face with Tucker Carlson. Well, they technically weren't together, but still, the concept is there, and we're going to talk about that and the bill that made it all happen. So, stick with me, folks, and I'll be right back. Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and wow, oh my, there were some sparks flying when Mike Braun ended up on Tucker Carlson, but we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Before we do that, I've got some tweets I want to share with you. The first one is this from Don Jr., who is replying to this New York Times post that says, Mount Rushmore was built on land that belonged to the Lakota tribe and sculpted by a man who had strong bonds with the KKK. It features the faces of 2 U.S. presidents who were slaveholders. Dum, dum, dum. And so Don Jr. says, New York City was also Native American land. You should tear down your office building or else you're obviously promoting systemic racism. Oh, good one. Yay. Don Jr. definitely has learned to troll from his dad. I love reading his posts. Anyway, then I wanted to share this with you because as we get into July 4th, if you cancel your plans on the 4th of July because the government is forcing you to, then you're missing the whole point of Independence Day. And I think that is so very true. You know, the whole thing about Independence Day was that we were independent from the crown and from the British government telling us what to do. And that's kind of been the spirit of America ever since, that we are free. We have liberties because we live in this country. And if the government is forcing you to stay home and you can't go here, you can't go there, are we really free? So, something to think about on Independence Day. Anyway, and you can also tell that this particular number is not near as many as it was, because when I came here, it was several days later. This one says 999 on June 30th, and then they came back and it was 902. And I went by, 2 days later, and it was only 49 more. So, yeah, they're playing with the numbers, that's for sure. But I thought this was really a good one. It's something we need to remember. And it should especially be something we think about on Independence Day this year because of the way our liberties were just stripped from us for months. And, you know, they're still being stripped with a lot of people in the United States. They still are not free to go out and do things. And they're under the tyranny of the mask. And we're going to talk about that in the next video because I've got some information for you on that one. So let's keep going. We've got this one, which is POTUS's schedule. Oh my goodness, you guys, look at the schedule. This man is a machine. Okay, so he left the White House at 4:45 p.m. on Friday the 3rd, which is today that I'm recording this, and actually just about a half an hour ago when I'm doing this. And then he flew to Ellsworth Air Force Base, and then he went to Mount Rushmore, and, you know, all of this that he's doing. Look at when the guy's going to get back to Washington. He's going to arrive at the White House at 4:25 a.m. That's a very long day, okay? And this guy is 74. I do not know how he does it. I don't. I mean, he's just a machine. It's amazing to me. So when they put, you know, something out about him going golfing, he deserved it a lot because this is what most of his days look like. And I just can't imagine that any other man his age would be able to keep this kind of schedule, and certainly not Joe Biden, right? So anyway, I wanted to share that with you, and then I wanted to show you this Mark Dice tweet because she's blaming Trump supporters for ruining her life. This lady right here, she's just so upset.
Trump supporters just took my job away from me. I've gotten death threats, rape threats, violent threats. It was okay, but now it doesn't like my future.
How in the world did Trump supporters do that? We're not taking jobs away. We're adding jobs. We're the people that are trying to get people back their jobs. And so the whole idea that they took my jobs away, I don't know what her situation is, but she was saying they took my job away unless, and I noticed this was put up by Chad of the Chaz, who's a conservative, who's kind of making fun of him. And maybe she was working there and that's what she was getting paid for protesting, because we know there were paid protesters. So is that what she's talking about? I don't know. And the rape threats and stuff, this is not coming from the conservatives. Is this more of the socialist councilwoman's ideas that she's been putting out there? Because she was blaming the right for doing all the bad things that happened in Chaz. So you got to kind of wonder if that's the situation. And I don't know, maybe Mark Dice has got this in one of his videos recently. I didn't see it, but then again, I've been having trouble keeping up, folks, because there's just so much happening. It's one reason why I didn't have a video the last couple days, because it's just been overwhelming trying to take all the information and process it. It's been so tiring. So, CFS been kicking my butt. So, anyway, I wanted to share this with you because I wanted to remind you of what Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream actually was, that people would be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing people looking only at skin color. But it's not the people on the right. It's the people on the left who are judging people by their skin color. You ain't black. If you don't vote Democrat, you ain't black. I mean, really? Seriously? You think that just because they don't vote the way you think they should, that's judging them by their skin color, not because of the content of their character. So, yeah, I think this is probably really true. And I can't understand. I would like for somebody to challenge some of these Black Lives Matter people with this. You know, how does this fit into Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream? Because I don't see it. I see this as being opposite. You go to Chaz, they have a garden just for blacks. How's that not judging somebody by the color of their skin? You know, you don't want hate speech out there, but yet they do all these horrible things and say all these horrible things about cops. How's that not hate speech? I just don't get it. Then I wanted to show you this because this was the 17th letter of the alphabet's deleted post. I mean, he didn't delete his post, but the Twitter account, it was, I don't know if what they did, but anyway, that was deleted and you may not have seen it, but this is so precious. You got to see it. I just think that's so sweet. And that is what should be happening in America right now. And that is what would be happening if it weren't for all the people on the left trying to make it all about race. It's not about race. We're all human beings. We're all the same under their skin. The skin color is immaterial because we are all different shades of brown. That's it. Sorry, folks. Some are lighter, some are darker. That's just where it is because we were all created by the same God. We were all created in God's image. So I wanted to share that with you just in case you didn't see it because that was very sweet and it needed to be out there. Okay, let's get down to Mr. Mike Braun. Okay, he's one of my senators and he has actually been standing up for Trump a lot. He's been in the news a little bit more than Todd Young. Nobody ever sees Todd Young hardly at all. I did see a clip of him just the other day, but really, nobody hears much about him. So at least Mike Braun is making some kind of headway, but this is from his website, and he introduces Reforming Qualified Immunity Act. Now, for those who don't know, the Qualified Immunity Act is really something that helps protect the police in some ways, because if they're doing their job and they're doing it in good faith and somebody gets hurt or whatever, then the person that got hurt can't come back and sue the cops when they were just trying to do their job. This is what he wants to do, reform it. Okay? He's got a bill out there. Now, before you start chomping at the bit, folks, let me go through this. Don't start writing your letter to Braun yet. Be informed before you start getting too ticked off at him. Okay? Well, here is the bill, or at least the text of it that's on his site. It's not actually been through any processes, and it's not official really yet. I mean, it's just in the presentation stage. It hasn't gone to any committees, I don't believe. And he doesn't have any summary about it. And it's just, not really ready for prime time yet. This is a very beginning draft. So what this is, it's not actually a total bill. It's a revision of a bill that was from 1871. And yeah, it took me a little while. And part of the reason I didn't do this a couple days ago when it first came out is because I needed to do some research on it. I was having trouble finding all the documents. And so that made me a little uncomfortable because I really wanted to have a better grasp of what was going on. Because I looked at this and it says under Section 1979. And so I was trying to find that. Well, it actually got renamed. So that's why I couldn't find it under Section 1979 because now it's under 1983. So, yeah, anyway. But here's the basic outline of it. In 1871, Congress passed this law, and it was known as the KKK law, the KKK Act, because it was supposed to combat rampant violations of civil and constitutionally secured rights across the nation, particularly in the post-Civil War South. Okay, so they had this thing going on. There were a lot of problems at first with the KKK, and so they wanted to set something up so that those, rights would be preserved for the newly freed slaves. And you can see here, this is the Wikipedia on it. It was actually from 1871, Civil Rights Act of 1871. I mean, it had several names, and so it was really hard kind of to track it all down. So that's what took me so long. But it was passed by the 42nd United States Congress, signed into law by Ulysses S. Grant. Okay? So again, when they're tearing down Grant statues, hello, do you know what this man did for you? Just frustrating. So yes, it was supposed to, the act was the last of 3 enforcement acts passed by the United States Congress from 1870 to 1871 during the Reconstruction era to combat strikes upon the suffrage rights of African Americans. The statute has been subject to only minor changes since then, but has been the subject of voluminous interpretation by courts. So yeah, the courts have ruled on it a lot. And it actually is in Title 42 of the United States Code, and it's section, this little thing here means section, 1983. So again, like I said, it took a little while to find that, because I was looking for 1979. I couldn't find that. And so, anyway, just in case you're not familiar with the history, I did want to point this out to you. In January 1871, Republican Senator John Scott of Pennsylvania convened a congressional committee to hear testimony from witnesses of Klan atrocities. In February, Republican Congressman Benjamin Franklin Butler of Massachusetts introduced his anti-Klan bill intended to enforce both the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Butler's bill was narrowly defeated in the House, whereupon Republican Representative Samuel Shellabarger of Ohio introduced a substitute bill, only slightly less sweeping than Butler's original. The bill brought a few holdout Republicans into line, and the bill narrowly passed the House, sailed through the Senate, and was signed into law on April 20th by United States President Ulysses S. Grant. So you can understand, why the Democrats are so eager to have that whole, the party switched kind of narrative going on. And, that just is so bogus. If you've never seen, PragerU has an excellent video on that. And I'll include the link to that down below in the description with all the other links. I didn't bring it up, but it really is worth watching. I hope I remember. If I don't, somebody in the comments, make sure you let me know that I forgot it. I'm going to try. So anyway, then it was amended and codified as Section 1983. And so this is how it actually reads right now. Every person who, under color of any statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state or territory or the District of Columbia, subjects or causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or other person within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws, shall be liable to the party injured in an action action at law, suit in equity, or other proper proceeding for redress, except that in any action brought against a judicial officer for an act or omission taken in such officer's judicial capacity, injunctive relief shall not be granted unless a declaratory decree was violated or declaratory relief was unavailable. For the purposes of this section, any act of Congress applicable exclusively to the District of Columbia shall be considered to be a statute of the District of Columbia. Okay, so that's it. And when I started reading, I thought, whoa, color, is that like the color of law? Well, not exactly. And just in case you've forgotten about the color of law, here it is. That's Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242. So this one is slightly different. And I'll leave the link down below. You can read through. We've already done one on this. If you haven't seen that video, you might want to check that out. But anyway, so this is the one that stands. This is what Mike Braun wants to alter slightly. Now, I went through the text of his, and I got to tell you, folks, sometimes I read these legal document type things, and I understand them and it's fine. This one, I had to read a few times, and I'm still not sure I totally understand it, and I don't know what the differences are. I really would have to sit down and compare them side by side, and yeah, my brain's not up to doing that right now. So he does have a little bit in here. What I think he's doing with this is my impression from reading it, is that he wants to make it a little easier, not a lot, but a little easier for people to sue, like, police if there's a violation, a deprivation of their legal rights. So right now, like I said, as it stands, as long as the officer is working in good faith that he is following the laws, then that should be okay, and they shouldn't be able to go after them with a suit. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean they can't bring a suit against them. It just means that the court is going to look at whether the officer was acting under reasonable, expectation of good faith there. So how is this going to be implemented? I'm not sure. I wonder how it's going to affect things like the nursing home people that were put back in, because you've got Cuomo and the other 4 governors who are putting COVID positive patients back into nursing homes that weren't prepared to handle that. Is that a deprivation of rights under the color of law? I don't know. I think probably they'd have a good reason to sue them, and I think they probably should be able to bypass the current law and be able to have a case there, because any person with an intelligence should know if you have COVID positive people, you don't put them back into a population with the most vulnerable people. Anybody with a brain should know that. They should. But yet they did it anyway. You can't really say that they were working in good faith. That was just a huge mistake. This is the situation. And again, that he goes through and he says, well, this is what the Supreme Court has said, and that they found that government actors had a good faith defense for making arrests under unconstitutional statutes based on a common law defense for the tort of false arrest in this particular case. And without going through all these cases, it would be hard for me to speak on it. But like I said, I'm just kind of giving you the idea that this is what they're talking about. And really, this qualified immunity has not been stipulated so much in the actual law, which I just read to you a little bit ago. It's really a matter of how the Supreme Court has ruled on it over time. So that's what he wants to address, and he wants to make it more of a, to reform it. And this is where the reform actually comes in. And again, before every person, and adding at the end of the following, except as provided in paragraph 2, again, I need somebody who's got legal brains to really figure this one out for me. From my impression, it was just that he wanted to make it a little easier for people to sue the police and to win if it was a case where they were deprived of their civil rights. Okay? So, Tucker Carlson decided he was going to do a segment on it. Now, he did refer to doing one the week before, but I don't recall him doing that, so I'm not sure. But anyway, this video here is the one that it's referring to. And I wanted to play just a little bit of this for you because you'll hear Mike Braun saying the things that Tucker then ended up challenging.
One Republican, though, has gone farther than that. As we told you last week, Senator Mike Braun of Indiana has introduced legislation to make it easier for left-wing activists to sue police officers. We must do this, Senator Braun explained, in part because Rayshard Brooks' death was egregious.
I wanted to put a template out there that protects law enforcement from frivolous lawsuits, but holds the egregious departments and individuals accountable in these egregious, instances of a George Floyd, a Rayshard Brooks, a Breonna Taylor.
In case you suspect we somehow selectively edited that clip, here's Republican Senator Braun going all the way in endorsing Black Lives Matter.
You support the Black Lives Matter movement.
I support that movement because it's addressing an inequity that has not been solved, from a grassroots level.
Okay, now before you get too ticked off at him, the second part of this, he does interview him. I'm not going to play all that, but I do want you to understand that I think Tucker gets a little overboard here, okay? Now, I like Tucker Carlson a lot. And so far, Mike Braun's been doing okay. I mean, he's new. This is his first round in the whole Senate and everything. But I think Mike Braun just doesn't really understand what he just said in that clip. First of all, I think the word of the day was egregious because he used it a lot. And he uses it in this interview. So I guess that's maybe his new word that he's learned or something. But the whole thing with Rayshard Brooks, guys, he was not clean as a whistle. There's a reason why that man suddenly, when they started putting cuffs on him, took off. Okay, he had a record and it was not a good record. The police couldn't let him walk away. They couldn't, not with the record that he had. There was no way. I mean, people said, oh, what's the big deal? He just, got drunk, fell asleep behind the wheel. No, it was more than that. And if you look at his record, he was on probation, I believe. All of this needs to be out there, but nobody's talking about that. Nobody seems to want to talk about the criminal records these people have. And so when the police were confronted with this guy, there's no way they could have let him walk away. He had broken his probation. He needed to be arrested. And the escalation of events, while it was seriously sad, and, I wish he wouldn't have done what he did, made the choices he did, it really was not a problem with the police. The police did what they should have done because of his record. They couldn't have let him walk away. And I know there's people who said, well, they had his license. They knew, they had his car. What is he going to do? Because he had a record. They couldn't let him walk away. And that was the whole thing to it. Now, he knew that. Okay, Rayshard Brooks knew that. That's why he ran. And that's the part that you're not hearing in the media. So this is a situation. And I think when it comes to the comment that Mike Braun made about Black Lives Matter, later on in the discussion back and forth, he said, well, all lives matter. Okay, he has fallen into the trap that a lot of people in the United States have fallen into. They don't make a distinction between the movement Black Lives Matter with the concept that all lives, including black lives, white lives, whatever color lives, matter. And that's the problem we have. The Black Lives Matter movement is no longer about black lives. Forget that, folks. It's not. It is about a socialist agenda, a Marxist agenda that they're trying to push through. So when people are talking to you about this, it's very important that when we engage our friends on the topic of Black Lives Matter, that we make sure they understand that that particular organization does not stand for black lives. And we need to make a distinction between Black Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter. Does that make sense? I mean, the slogan Black Lives Matter is not the same as the organization Black Lives Matter. Plain and simple. And if you can make that distinction with your friends, then they start to understand. Now, when I get ready to write my letter to Mike Braun, which I'm going to, okay, and you can do that if you are one of his constituents. You go to his website and you go to Contact Mike right here. You click on Contact Mike and it will bring up a form and you can fill that in. Now, sadly, unfortunately, you can only do this if you are a constituent. If you aren't a resident of Indiana, you can handwrite him a letter and send it to Congress, I'm sure, but you're not going to be able to fill out this form because you do have to include your address, and if your address is not in Indiana, it won't let you do it. So I would recommend you do this, but here's what you need to tell him, okay? You need to let him know that Black Lives Matter organization is an arm of the Democratic National Committee. We know that because I covered it in a previous video. Remember, when you click on the donation link for Black Lives Matter, it takes you directly to Act Blue. Act Blue is a hub for collecting monies for the Democrat National Committee and for all Democrat organizations. But what they're using Black Lives Matter for is to channel money into the coffers of Joe Biden right now. And that's what we see happening in huge numbers. How can we tell that? Well, all you have to do is go look at the data. And the data will show you that, yes, this money is being channeled from Black Lives Matter actually into the Joe Biden campaign. And that's why in the last couple of months, they're bragging about how Joe Biden outraised the donations over Trump. Well, of course he did, because people who had no clue that Black Lives Matter actually was a Democrat organization that was channeling money to Joe Biden's campaign gave money. So if you come across any friend of yours, that's talking about Black Lives Matter and how we need to support that, you need to go back and you need to show them that, because that's important. And I think this is what Mike Braun needs to have drawn to his attention. He needs to understand that when he makes a statement like that, it supports Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter is putting money into Joe Biden's campaign. So that's what we need to call him on. It's not that, he said Black Lives Matter, because he did go back, like I said, in the interview, and he said all lives matter. And I think he probably genuinely looks at it like that, like it's no big deal because, all lives matter. So what's the deal with saying Black Lives Matter? We need to let him know that's the issue. That's what's wrong with it. And that right now, it's not going to do us any good to reform that immunity. And at the end, when he's talking about this, one of the things that he pointed out to Tucker was the reason he was doing it. And again, Tucker was really not listening to him at this point because he was trying to talk over him. What Braun was trying to say is this was a strategic move to get out ahead of the Democrats, because if we don't do something, then people are going to say we're against the black community and we're supporting the police and letting them get away with murder. Okay? That's what he was trying to avoid, but Tucker kind of turned it a little bit there, and I wasn't really impressed with how Tucker handled this particular one. Most of the time, I really love what Tucker does, but in this particular case, I think he wasn't listening to what Braun was actually saying. I think Braun's heart's in the good place, but the guy just doesn't understand the game yet. He really does not. He's thinking in a strategic way, but it's not what he needs to have for this battle. He's not used to exactly what's going on and just how bad the deep state is. Because, he's just a businessman from Indiana. He didn't have any idea what he was getting into. And I think his eyes are starting to be open, but he's very new at this. So he really needs to have us as constituents, if you are one of his constituents, to tell him what's what. And why he shouldn't have made the statement he did, and why the legislation that he's doing, the reason it's not got anybody else with him on it, it's not what needs to be done. And you can see here, I'll make sure that I include this. This is the view of it, and you can see that it's just introduced, but he doesn't even have a summary yet. Okay? You look at this, there's nothing, it doesn't even have the text in here yet. The text really isn't even there. And the text that I had of it right here, this is from his site. So it has nothing. It has nobody who is helping him with it. Nobody is joined. And the only action is, this is it. Just pretty much, yeah, it's been introduced. This is extremely new. And again, this is probably his first bill that he's done on his own. So I just think that he's very new to the process and he doesn't really know how the game is played, which in some ways is good, but that also is a naivete that he needs to overcome. And then we have this, which is another bill dealing with the whole concept of police, ending qualified immunity. Now, this guy wants to end it completely, and this is Justin Amash. We've talked about him before, too. He's a real jerk. So that's something that if you want to look at that, I'll leave this down below and you can go through. You can see he does have a summary and he's got the other stuff down here. And basically it just wants to get rid of it. Yep. It's just not worth it. We need to get rid of it so everybody can sue the police every time the police look cross-eyed at them. And that's it. So that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by and I'll see y'all later.